So I'd like to introduce to you guys Paolo Mott, who is the finance director for the Pacific Plains region. Plus, he serves as finance director for the Minnesota chapter. So he has some really great perspective on finances and kind of a different way to think about finances in your chapters. I mean, I know we need to make sure that we're not in the red year after year after year.
Maybe.
However, there's a new way to think about that, a different way to think about that.
Yep.
Paul will take it away.
Perfect. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. So she kind of gave you the wind-up of who I am, kind of what I do. I'm going to tell you how I got into trapped into being a finance director, just like Rick was trapped in 16 years ago. But let me just start off with a little story. So I spent 10 years on the city council in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, which is a suburb of Minneapolis. So for 10 years, I sat up there with doing government stuff, right? And I left that a couple years back. And this summer, I don't know if you guys saw what happened in St. Louis Park. Anybody know what happened in St. Louis Park this summer? Okay, so here's what the geniuses on the city council did. They thought it'd be really smart because, you know, our country's Joanne knows. Our country is so together and everybody just loves each other and our, you know, politics are not divisive. So the city council in their ultimate wisdom makes a big splash and says, we will no longer say the Pledge of Allegiance before a council meeting. Trace knows this. And do you think that got noticed anywhere across the country? Just a little bit, right? So we literally, in St. Louis Park, this sleepy little town outside of Minneapolis, the council says this and they say some kind of stupid things about, well, hey, well, whatever they said, and it brought out the best and the worst of America, right? It brought out protesters and all this kind of good stuff. And so they had to go back and revisit it at the next council meeting, and there literally was about 500 to 600 protesters at City Hall that night. It got so tense that they actually called in a SWAT team, right? Oh my God. And I'm not making this up, but there was like a guy dressed as Benjamin Franklin ready to fight a guy dressed as an eagle, and there's a woman dressed up as the Statue of Liberty, and she was ready to kick the butt of the woman dressed up as Betsy Ross, and it was like this total mayhem, right? And that next day, right, I watched it all on cable because that's what nerds do. You watch your city council member cable. The next day, I was going to go speak at the Minnesota Government Finance Officers Association's annual meeting. And I was the opening keynote the next morning, and so I had to fly in a little plane from Minneapolis to lumberjack land, you know, where everybody wears flannel. And there's 800 people in a ballroom there. And these are all the finance directors for every city, county in Minnesota. Okay, so just picture finance people. Okay? Everybody got finance people in their heads? Yeah, okay? So, but on the plane up there with me is the former mayor that I served with, right? And so Mayor Jacobs and I are flying up and we're having this conversation going like, what the heck was going on? We leave the council and it all blows up, and what are we gonna, oh my God. And Jeff goes, Paul, did you watch all that chaos? I mean, there's almost fisticuffs, and we had to call, they called in the SWAT team. And he said, Paul, I could have fixed that with 5 words. I said, well, Mr. Mayor, what were the 5 words that you could have said that would have like brought all those people together? He said, simple. I would have said, but first, the finance report. Because, as we knew from sitting on a council for 10 years, there is nothing more boring and more whatever than listening to a finance report. And yet, let me tell you this, the most exciting and the most vital thing you should do every month with your chapter is talk about the finance report. It should not be the thing that can clear the room, it should be the thing that everybody cares about. And I know from sitting on a council for 10 years and we did our budget every year, right, the big budget fight, no citizens ever showed up in 10 years to complain about the budget. But you cut down an old tree and you'll get 200 people there, angry. But your finance documents are your ultimate policy documents. Your finance tells you where you put your priorities, what your strategies are. What you spend is what you do. And really, I think, my opinion, finance should be the core of how we look at how we operationalize our strategies and our tactics and where we put our values. And I think we've missed out on that for a very, very long time. So I've been an IABC member for 25 some years, right? I'll tell you also, I also belong to PRSA. I get different things out of both of them. One's international, one's just local, US. I think there's a great advantage to being international. I use it with my clients all the time. SCMP matters to some of my clients that are international. We should tout that. Anyways, just my little commercial there. But about 5 years ago, someone came to me and they said, hey, you've been active on IABC. You've been the judging coordinator for 20 some years. We can't find anybody who wants to be the finance chair. And we noticed that you have an MBA, so tag, you're it. And that was pretty much the recruitment model. And then they literally came and they said, hey, let's go meet on a Saturday. And they brought the big finance Bible. And they sat down a big fat book in front of me. And they said, this is everything you need to know. And I said, no, actually, it's not what I need to know. Because I think you're looking at finance all wrong. And I think you're looking at what you're doing every wrong. Because I'd been to board meetings, and this was, and I know Joanne and Trace are here. You guys have both been chapter presidents. So you guys know kind of what some of the board meetings were like at sometimes. Because, I mean, do people like to go to board meetings, generally?
I did.
Maybe, maybe not. But I can tell you from a non-board member person, when I want to give like a awards chapter update, I would sit and listen to the board meeting and like you'd kind of get, I got a little depressed, to be honest with you, right? Because here's what they were like. They're like, we lost 20 members this year, blah, 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 and it was all kind of this downward looking kind of spiral. And we were a chapter of, correct my math, like 350? 425 when you were there, right? So when I joined in the early 90s, we were 400, and now with the latest snafu, we're about 120 actual members that are non-500 club members. So we have continued to slide. And you would think that we should sit around all day and be depressed about that. But I'm going to tell you we're not. Because we look at things really radically differently. We've looked at things differently for a long last 5 years here, because I said when I took this job, I'm going to do finance my way. Okay? I'm going to do math my way. Now, I haven't had this discussion with the PPR board yet. since my flight was delayed yesterday and I didn't get here till later. So we'll have that later, Tracy. Just so you know. You heard it here first. So I said, we're going to do this differently. We're going to do all our finance so any member can look at our finances anytime. Not that that wasn't really done before, but we're going to have open book. You can see every entry, every whatever. We don't really care. But we're not going to judge things the same way. And here's what we did. We created what we call a vitality index. What is a vitality index? We started looking at, does the services that we're providing, where we're spending money, whether we're making money or losing money, add vitality to our members? Does it give them something they can't find anyplace else? Does it grow their interest in what we're saying? So the old way of looking at it sometimes would be this. We would hold a chapter monthly meeting or whatever it was and bring in a speaker, and then there'd be an accounting and saying, hey, we lost $70 this month. And everybody would be like, okay, well, let's not do that ever again. Or we'd do something else, like we would have a group, a masterminds group, right? And people wouldn't show up or whatever, or it cost more, and people would, we should never do that again. And here's what I would tell you. Both of those analyses are wrong. We have 2 mastermind groups now today, and I get happy every month when I get to write the checks for the reimbursements that we've lost money. We lose money on mastermind group, right? But we gain member vitality like you would not believe. More than 10% of our members belong to one of the 2 mastermind groups. One on the west side of town, one on the east side of town. That's where they get their, that is their jam. They love those coffees, and we lose money, and I'm happy to write a check where we're losing money, because that is driving member engagement and member vitality. To me, that is the way we should do it. Yep.
Can you just give a quick overview of what a mastermind group is?
A mastermind group is a group of like-minded IABC members who want to talk about something that they can't talk about, most of them because they work in an office of one, and they want to say, hey, I want to know what you think about this, or help me solve this problem. And so they have kind of like a little agenda where maybe they say, here's our topic, but mostly it's about camaraderie. It's mostly about senior level talking to people that you can solve problems with.
Mostly people 10 years experience.
10 years experience or more.
And
Yep.
it's all members, so this is one of the programming things. that you do need to be a member to
Yes.
join. But if you want to come sit in on one and then decide, oh, I like this, I'm going to be a member.
Exactly.
That's happened a few times.
Yes.
Why is there a cost involved? Why-
Because
what-
we want you to come and be our guest and we'll buy your coffee. So you pay a one-time fee of $25 and I keep an accounting code for the $25 and we lose money every month on that. But 10% of my members come to that and they love it. We've just grown to another group on the other side of town because of that. We use that as a loss leader. You want to look at it from that perspective? To me, that is a vitality leader. I don't care if I'm losing money on that. I'm looking at that as the best thing we do. That is what we should be doing. Let me give you another example of how we look at things. We had a session for displaced workers, so people who had lost their jobs. So if you've ever been through this thing, and this happened to me, they eliminated all the positions in the company, and one day you're working in PR and the next day you're walked out the door and you're 50 years old and you are suddenly faced with, oh my God. So I was familiar with that experience, and we had a session. We advertised the crap out of it and 3 people showed up. And we spent about $200 with our advertising, with our food that day, and 3 people showed up. Now tell me, was that a success or a failure?
If it was 3, it was probably.
Exactly. For those 3 people, it was the best thing they did. It was the most helpful we've ever been to them, and they would tell you that's why they renewed that day. Because all of a sudden, here was someone that we had 3 people, they had one-on-one time with us, and they said, that was the best thing that saved my sanity, because you guys did that. We lost money on that, but for them, that was the most vital thing we did. So when we look at programming, we're not just looking at pluses and minuses, we're okay with loss leaders. Because what we found over time is that when we shifted our model to say, hey, it's okay for non-members to come to our events, non-members pay the freight. Non-members, we earn more money from non-members than we do from members. So think about this. We get as a chapter $70 for each member. That's it, 70 bucks. If I get you to come to 3 of my events in a year and I make 20 bucks off of you, I've made as much off of you as a non-member as almost a member. So we look at it as it's okay for us to do that. Our last event we had Joanne at the brewery, we paid for that. That resulted in 3 new members signing up after that. So we spent $150 on free beer and we gained 3 members. That's $210, we made $60. But what we got was vitality, because that event was fun, a lot of fun, right? And it added to the sense of it. So we'll do an accounting on every event, but we don't judge it the way you think we judge it. We're judging it on what do we get at, what do our members want? And we have to start thinking of our members in the mindset of our members, right? I hear a lot of people talk about kind of the diversity type angle, but to me it's the diversity of what they're looking for. It's not the category of the person, it's the mindset of what they're looking for. So we have to offer programming that's diverse. We have to offer programming that works for introverts and extroverts, for internal comms people and PR people. We have to do things that people can do in a big group and a small group. I can tell you our masterminds groups rock because that works for those people. It's specifically tailored for people who want to give up, or go spend 1 coffee a month learning and having a sense of their tribe, right? That's a great thing. So the diversity in our mindset is the diversity of program that hits different types of people looking for different things from us. So we actually gained 3 members at that last event, and the month before we gained 3 new members that came in that same way because they heard about masterminds, came in for 1, and we're building our base that way. Now, if we took out this latest membership snafu thing, we'd actually be a slightly growing chapter, which would be a good thing. We're still trying to figure out who's gone and who's not gone, but we'd be a slightly growing chapter, but I would tell you that we're one of the most vital chapters you will find. So how many chapters here have trouble recruiting board members? So we have a problem turning away board members right now, currently. And this is what we've done. So a few years back, I think 4 years or 5 years, I have to do my math right, we started looking at, why did some of our past presidents go away and never want to be members again? And to me, if you're a past president, the fact that you don't want to be part of us, that's a signal, right? So we kind of went to our past, we call them the Dead Presidents Society, right? So we went to our dead presidents and we said, what are you looking for that you're not getting? And they said, well, we've kind of done everything, but we'd like to give back. And so that's when we started our Convergence Summit, our big annual conference. And I know your conference is the next couple days here, but for Minnesota chapter, our annual conference sprung out of them wanting an avenue for their energy, right? The first year we netted almost 20 grand net profit from that. We took that 20 grand and we sent 7 people to LI, right? What happens when we send you to LI? You commit to being on the board for 2 years. And you know what? LI is a great thing. People get a lot out of it. It drives their interest in IABC. It makes them vital. And the next year we netted about 15 grand and we sent 7 more people to LI. So we turned that good feeling, that vitality that our dead presidents wanted, and the dead presidents they generate for our chapter, into something that we want to make sure that we have consistent, stable leadership. So we started looking at that differently. Now, I will tell you honestly that some of the dead presidents don't like the fact that we invested into leadership. I've gotten some feedback from a few of them that, you know, we should be spending it other ways. And I say, well, join the board again and vote on it with us. But we've determined the strategy to keep ourselves there is that we have a board, all our board is completely filled out. I think we have 10 or 12 directors now. And for each director, we have a director in training. So we have a farm system so that we have that going up with us. So we've taken something, we actually went to the dead presidents, we said, what are you missing out on? And they said, we don't want to do this, this, and this because we've done that, but give us something else that's special. And you know what? They did it, and that is, in my opinion, a great conference, a one-day conference that you can do fairly inexpensively. We do it together with the University of Minnesota. We also allow our members to speak at the conference. So if you're looking for vitality things that non-members don't get, if you're a member, you get to speak at a monthly meeting. So if you're looking to talk about your product, your service, or just build your brand personally, being a member, you get something more. You are more vital as a member than not. And that's the other way we're getting people in to say, hey, if you want to speak at Convergence in front of 100-some people with all the big names in town, be a member. If you want to speak at a monthly meeting, be a member, because we'll put you on stage. We'll give you that vitality that you're looking for. So I tend not to focus on the math of finance, because math is just math, right, Rick? It's just numbers, right? But what we have to do is turn, what are those numbers telling, what story are they telling? How are we driving the narrative of how we use that to drive our strategy? And when you link those two things together, you're going to do better about kind of creating the narrative of what your finance is. Your finance directors should be front and center on every decision, because they should be driving the narrative and saying, hey, maybe we should adjust our budgeting, because that's adjusting our priorities to get the outcomes that we think we need. So in Minnesota, that's the tack we've taken on this. We've taken a very different track. They've allowed me to do that and say, hey, let's look at the analysis of this, but let's not do it based on dollars and cents. Let's do it on vitality. And our metric is vitality. Is it making you feel like you want to be here time and time again? And with that, I'll take your questions. Yes?
I'll start off. When I first joined the San Diego chapter, I guess I'm an IABC unicorn, because I called and said I wanted to be a member and I wanted to go straight to the board. I guess that doesn't happen usually. And they said, sure, and what we have open is finance. And so,
there you have it.
That's not
it's always open.
I wanted, but, you know, and I had the same mentality then that I think a lot of chapters have today. And I think that you touched on the mistake of that. And we're seeing chapters that are closing that have $70,000 in their account.
Right.
You know, the goal of the chapter isn't to save the most money that they possibly can.
Right.
This isn't a personal retirement account, and you know, but we go with it with that mentality because that's what we have as individuals. You know, you want to grow that balance sheet and get it bigger. But you know, these are the same chapters who won't send anybody to LI or to this meeting or something like that.
Right.
And they just keep building their bank account. And what eventually happens if they're not investing in the chapters and using the money for that is the chapters end up dying. And the money just goes back to international eventually. And
right.
So You know, we really need to get better at how do we spend that money to better our chapters and the people in them, and then the chapters will grow, and it all, you know, is possible.
So here's the brilliant thing about LI. Who's been to LI? Okay, it's in February, and if you live in Minnesota, there's no place that you don't want to be in the middle of winter. And someone's going to say, hey, you can go to Austin, Texas, or Dallas, or Long Beach, and all you have to do is be on the board for 2 years. And we'll get you out of town for like 4 days. And you'll meet really cool people, and you'll do some engaging things. So LI is actually, for Minnesota people, that's a huge plus. That's North Dakota, you know what I'm talking about. Right?
So the year that you started sending, 7 people to LI, when that's not what had been happening before, can you talk about how engagement on your board changed, or other changes?
So 2 ways. So first, we started actually paying attention at LI. Like, we didn't just go there to drink beer with people. We actually listened to the classes and the speakers. And the first thing we did is we stopped having board meetings, because that's one of the things they taught us. Don't have a board meeting, have a board party. Meet your members the way they want to be. So one reason I really didn't want to join the board was because I couldn't imagine going someplace, sitting in we used to hold them at the bank offices at whatever, and kind of like being on a board. So like literally I think 1/3 of our meetings are in person now, 1/3 are via Skype, and the other 1/3 are basically as we sit there and do them at a event. So we'll do them right before the beer drinking at the event. So we've really matched them up. So it actually it's fun to be on the board. It's easier to be on the board. It's not that huge commitment. And that's, we learn right from LI. And we do expect that our members, you have a 2-year commitment. We're giving you this kind of gift of a trip, which is really a gift from the Dead Presidents Society, for you to do this, to keep us stable in terms of leadership. And I mean, I don't know, Tracer, did you guys go to LI when you were on the board? Because I know when I asked to go like 10, 15 years ago, I was told, no, you can't go. Like they didn't want to grow the leadership, was the response I got anyways. And it wasn't when you guys were presidents, but
We only had funds to be able to send, I think, to.
Yeah, maybe that.
Usually the upcoming leaders that were going. It was
Right.
the president and the past president that went.
Right.
That we paid for, but there were other people from the chapter that sometimes paid.
Paid on their own. Yeah.
So for the chapter to be able to do that, I think
It's huge.
amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
So was that shift to, from board meetings, a more formal school way of doing things, to board parties, was that easy? I mean, was it contentious? Or did you, we would like to think it wouldn't be, but.
Adam, you just answered your own question. Think about it. No, seriously. Like, is that where you want to spend your time? I mean, board meetings sometimes would be an hour and a half of, feeling like you're at a board meeting. And now, doing them on Skype, everybody shows up on a Skype meeting because it's pretty easy, right? Technology helps us. And then we do think it's important to be together, but our board meetings all have food. Like, someone will bring their favorite thing. So who was the baker that did all the baking? Yeah. So we're inviting you to one of our board meetings because that would be super awesome if you showed up and brought all your stuff. Because that's what happens now, is that people bring stuff and it kind of becomes more of a social event where you see like, oh, Adam likes Russian food and, blah, blah, whatever it might be, right?
You do it at someone's house?
We've done it at houses, we've done it at people that live in apartment complexes, we move them around because there is a thing in the Twin Cities where there's 2 sides of the river. The Minneapolis side is the cool side, and then there's St. Paul. So, just saying. Yes?
Also, I love everything you're saying. I'm one of the few that think the finance role is the best role on the board.
Where's my finance peeps, Rick? Yeah.
So I'm just wondering though, because we're seeing that also in the southern region, that chapters are closing and they have a bunch of money.
Yep.
I'm just wondering if we could maybe make an offer that we offer some sort of support as regions to chapters. And maybe it's not just the finance person, but it's also the president or president-elect. Because it really is about not math, it's about thinking differently about the way you use it. So
Right.
I don't know if maybe that, if you guys would find that helpful, that we have some sort of regular calls to discuss how we can support you guys.
In terms of the finance?
Finance, the way you're spending your money.
Oh, yeah.
How to revive membership through.
Oh, yeah, if I can interject, and Mike, thank you so much for bringing, you saw me nodding vehemently when you were saying that, because I have no disrespect to my leaders in my chapter, but It's like, this is our money. We can't, I'm not gonna spend, go over $1 to get into the next board, because that's not the way to do it. And I'm just thinking, well, if it's the vitality, I love that idea. But I don't know what is a proper budget. I'm not the finance person, and I'm kind of new on the board, so I don't know what, that was one of the questions that our president wanted me to kind of bring up, is what do most chapters have? And you said, what chapter closed with 70,000? And you count, for heaven's
They don't ever
sakes.
close because of money usually. I think I only know of one.
They don't close because of money,
Closed
right?
PPR, and it was
Right.
because of some sort of scandal money kind of thing. But other than that, it's usually lack of people, lack of interest, and they have, $40,000 in the budget or something.
So what's the danger zone for for a budget getting down below?
So, thanks to the stewardship of like Joanne and Trace from Minnesota, we actually, when I took over, we had a surplus. Like, we had more dollar in than dollar out of about $30,000. And then we threw on top of that doing the Convergence Summit, the first year where we made 20 grand. So suddenly we had this big 50,000. And if you looked at our bylaws, we can stop the tape now. Our bylaws said that we were supposed to give that to the IABC Foundation. That's what our bylaws, Minnesota bylaws said. And we said, Joanne's making a face. And we said, let's change the bylaws because we want to reinvest it back in our members. So we created a strategic spend down budget where we said, here's how we are going to allocate this to make us more vital. And here's why we feel good about sending 7 people to LI. Here's your budget. Each of you get $1,500 for airfare, hotel, registration. There you go. The next year we did that, we actually encouraged people to be speakers because then you get a free $199 registration. We had 3 people do that, so that allowed us to send another person because we just turned that money right back that we didn't spend. So we had a strategic spend down budget that we did for 2 years to kind of bring us more into what we needed, because it isn't for us to hold members' money for a long time. That's not why it's there. It's to service the members. So we actually put in the budget for for our masterminds group, hey, go ahead and spend this. If we lose $50 a month for a year, okay, we have that. I mean, that was paid in before for other people, so we should use it to keep us vital. Yes?
When I was a board member, but not board president, we got, the surplus was really growing.
Yep.
And, not necessarily deliberate, but, there've been a few successful years, strong membership, et cetera. And we got some pressure / direction from, I don't think regional, I think it was international at the time, to spend down on that. That cash was not looking good, just like, banks, publicly owned companies, et cetera. Got too much cash on hand, not distributing that, whether that's dividends or member benefits. It's the same thing. You are stewards of money when you're on a board, whether you're in finance or not. And I think you ought to be asking if we've got this, surplus, or we've got X, and surveys aside, are we, what are we doing for the sustainability and the value of our members? The sustainability of our chapter is, I think, stewardship, which is why I think it is a smart thing to send that many people to LI. And, and then the other thing is, like you say, what's the, are we of dynamic value? And how do we get there? But if it's creeping up, and you're looking at that going, what should we do?
What should we do?
Yeah, you should not let it keep
We should not hold it.
without having a strategic plan for how you're going to get value.
Exactly.
And get input, obviously. Don't just come up with a wild idea.
Yeah, very cool.
Is there any other questions in the room?
Yes.
I have a couple of questions. Speaking of, back to your question, what is the realistic budget? Are there also some guidelines from being a nonprofit organization? I know that several years ago, one of our treasurers who came in and did a lot of cleanup on our finance commented that we should pay attention to IRS guidelines about how much money we can have.
Right.
So I don't know if that's something you want to.
Yeah, so our reserve guideline that was in our guidelines document was that the reserve should not be more than 1 year operating budget. So if you look at your operating budget of what you come in dollar out, it basically is the doomsday scenario that if the world ended or whatever, you could run your chapter for a year and restart it. So that's what our guidelines is, and that's what we based ours off of, and that's how we determined what our spend down strategy would be, that we were well above our, based on a vitality metric. It was like, how is this going to make us vital? How is this going to actually engage different types of members for what they're looking for? I think we assume all members look for the same thing, and that's a mistake. They look for, I mean, there are members that will come only to our masterminds group, or they'll only come to our, we do a charity thing where we, what's it called, Joanne? Where we give advice to nonprofits. Yeah, Gift of Communications. I will see people at Gift of Communications, that's the only time I see them all year, but because they're IABC members, they can be there and they can give back that way, and they feel like $1 million. So we can't assume they'll be the same person that wants to come and drink beer with me at the beer hall, or the same person who wants to come and listen to a lecture on whatever else. So we have to kind of program for different types of personalities to make them feel vital, because it's not one size fits all. And I think that's a mistake we make.
Do we have something, Paul, that maybe like a little matrix or a little, something, a guide for chapters that want to move towards that, but they really don't, like they'd be starting from scratch? So is there something that we can give them that would be like helpful in that process, especially if you're introducing it to a chapter that's like
Introducing like vitality scoring. So we actually, so what I did is I said, okay, if I'm going to do this my way, I'm going to go talk to the dead presidents, like one-on-one, had coffees with them. We actually wrote out what made people vital from their perspective. And so I did like 6 or 7 of these coffees to say, tell me what it looks like to you from your experience. Then we did some with the board, and we actually did a session on with white papers, and all the board inputted into what made people feel good about their membership. So we actually have a list of things to say, let's do this, let's do that. This kind of goes with this. And that's how we did our strategic planning. Right? Our strategic planning was based on what makes us vital. And so it was driving member value, driving member value, driving member value, and also keeping consistent leadership, like sustainable leadership. And people love that. And then it was the ability to do what they wanted to do. Masterminds, like when we started masterminds, people were like, oh, no one's ever going to want to do that. I've got 30 people. I mean, 10% of my membership shows up at those. They do want that. Yes?
I was just thinking, to add what Sue is saying, I think what she's sort of asking is there like a tip sheet, fact sheet, guide that, you know, if another chapter wants to do this, instead of starting from scratch, they can say, well, let's pick Paul's brain, and, you know, like they don't have access to you today. Is there like a quick sheet?
If I were really smart, I'd say, yeah, it's in the IABC portal thing, hub.
I'm sure we could put it in.
I'm sure we could put it in there. I'm sure I have it someplace, and I'd be glad to share it with whoever wants it.
Just because the spin down strategy might not be the mindset that somebody had. I mean, I think somewhere along, like you said, somewhere along the line, being a good steward of member dollars somehow meant how much could you store up and, you know, keep and make sure the chapter still went on.
Right.
And now it's like a change in that. So like if there was a thing that said, you know, hey, what's a spin down budget and how do you
how do you do that?
Like one pager that had bullet points. I'm not talking about write a dissertation or something.
We could do that.
Something that would be a guideline on how to approach it.
Yeah.
You know, you do a webinar, it's recorded. I mean, you're recording it. Looks like somebody we have this.
I don't want to promise. I mean, it's technology. That's the plan.
It's like an official webinar that IABC offers where you talk about what you do with a chapter, and then you know people can ask questions or whatever, and then that can be recorded, and then. I mean, I think that the issue is the finance director might be changing every couple of years.
No, they never they never do. Rick knows that.
I think what a concern might be if you just have it about finances, then the finance director's, oh, I got to.
It's not about.
I think what I hear Paul saying and what I've seen is that it's not finance.
It's not.
Here.
It's strategy.
So who should listen to this? Who should be part of this discussion? It's not a template for finance. It's for the board. It's how you have finance be part of your strategy of, you know, where the numbers are, where do we put them is not the decision of finance only. And it's not.
So let me do. Do you got time for a funny story? So I actually gave this presentation to LI last year in Long Beach, and 5 people showed up. So Tammy Nienaber and I gave this in Long Beach with this same kind of thing, and we said, here's what we're going to talk about, and 5 people showed up. And here's the funny part. So we started it with kind of something that we thought was really cool and clever. And we did you guys know the story of the two shoe salesmen? Anybody know that story? So, company sends shoe salesmen to a new land to sell shoes. Sends 2 salespeople out there, and the first one goes there and realizes that everybody there is barefoot. And he calls back and he says, "Oh my God, it's a disaster. They don't know what shoes are." And the second guy goes, sees that everybody's barefoot, calls back and he says, "Glorious news, they don't have shoes," right? So it's an attitudinal thing. And so part of what we talked about was, whether you live under a scarcity mindset or abundance mindset. So the scarcity mindset is the person that doesn't see that their opportunity. The abundance mindset says, how do we advance that? So we did this little skit. So Tammy's, I don't know if you guys know Tammy Nee, but she's awesome. She's moving back to Minnesota, but her husband and son are both actors. So we kind of bought them lunch and they acted this skit out, right? And so they, in the middle of this, they kind of like pretended like they were taking a phone call, and they did this skit about the 2 shoe salesmen. And on the 5 responses, 3 people thought they were real people. And they said, "That was so rude that those people got up in the middle and started talking about shoes." And they So 2 people got it and 3 people didn't. But the point is, it's the mindset. I'm not saying IABC people are stupid, but they did such a good job acting that people thought it was like really like people walking in and doing that. But the point of that story is, it's the difference between abundance and scarcity, and which do you want to embrace? And so if you want to be vital, you have to embrace abundance and not scarcity. Your mindset has to be, what are we going to do that's bigger and better? And that's kind of how you have to look at things. And that's part of what it is. Go ahead, Rick.
I think you need to be careful if you put this on finance people, because some of them want to hold it off. So you can't only sell it to them, because
No.
most aren't going to buy it.
Finance should be the partner of strategy.
To the whole board. And sometimes the board's going to have to bring the finance guy kicking and screaming into this scenario. And sometimes it's going to be the other way around. The finance guy is going to have to be pulling the board and say, this is what we got to do.
But again, the finance guy should not be known as Dr. No, right? The finance guy should be a strategic partner to...
That's why sometimes they got to be pulled in.
Right.
Or you got to get a new finance.
Well, the crazy thing is the chapter says, hey, we have to hold on to all this money because at some point maybe we're not taking enough money in from members and membership is dropping, so we won't have the funds. Well, if the membership is dropped that low, then you're closing anyway. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
It has nothing to do with your money.
It's like a game of chicken.
Because you only have 3 members.
Right.
You know, and so it's kind of all tied in together. So you may as well use the money to keep the chapter whole. I mean,
like if you had, some of the chapters that closed and they only had like a handful of members, what we should be saying is, hey, maybe you want to send 2 people that aren't members to LI and show them what we offer. As opposed to, hey, we'll sit on it, because the bylaws say we have to sit on the money for 2 years, and then it goes back to us, like as the region. So we'll get a lot of money. Well, what good does that really do, unless you're kind of using it? It's an asset. Yes?
We're talking about adding value to members and board members. Are there any rules and regulations against like offering 5 scholarships for people to get their certifications? Or, I know we're talking about sending people to places, but does that same rule apply? Are we allowed to spend our money and like help just paying outright for their full certification? Or
So I don't think so. Our rule was this: when we did our spend down budget, this is what we said. We said, look, anybody who needs a scholarship, they only have to come and talk to the treasurer, so it's a conversation between 2 people, and the board gave me authority to give those scholarships. So like we just had the membership where people were lapsing and they're like, oh, I'm in job transition. And all they do is call me and I would write the check for them so they could stay a member, or if they want to do the same way. So our rule is that we have this surplus, that's strategic, and we've allocated funds for just that. And it should be. I would rather have you actively engaged.
there might be some rules.
I was just going to say, I was at a panel on this at LI last year, and I think this very issue came up. Can we
scholarship
offer it to volunteers or as an enticement? And in order to maintain that ISO,
maybe we can. But I'd
be really careful.
But what?
like.
We've promoted it as a
I would be
chapter.
careful with certifications because it's the.
Okay,
Right.
strike that. But as a chapter, we have promoted SCMP and CMP by offering it every chance we can, because like all of us that are SCMP, we will proctor the test. We sent 5 of us through the first time, like we all volunteered to go do it so we could all then become proctors. And we offer it at Convergence, and we'll offer it during the year. And if one member shows up, again, and it takes 3 of us to sit there to proctor the test, which has happened, we still consider that super vital.
And
Because to that
invest in
person,
programming where people can come
Exactly.
talk about the experience. I think
Exactly.
that's vital, but it just with the actual cost itself of certification, I'd be really careful and check
Okay.
with the board on that
Good
The
point.
International offers a scholarship program. Ginger, how many scholarships are given out per year, or 4? Okay. How many people apply for those this year?
Last year? 4.
Oh.
there you go.
So if you have like an influx of 20 people, will International up the?
get people to apply.
Cool, okay, thank you.
Any final questions, comments, feedback? Yep. Oh.
The vitality, when your question of what makes people vital, were you just asking the dead presidents?
No, we started with them.
Okay,
We started with
started.
the wisdom, the experienced people that had seen it, and we picked them at random because, you know, we could go back like 20 years. So we kind of just want to get a sense, and then again, we looked at our board and we asked a lot of our volunteers, just what are you actually looking for? And it was kind of basically informal research, you know, it wasn't scientific necessarily, but it really, I mean, we wrote it all out and said, this is what people are looking for. And I think the biggest thing that comes through is that people that are, I'm an introvert, believe it or not, I'm a total introvert. Like, so, like who said that they after they talk all day, they want to just go, that's me too, right? So for some people, you have to program both for extroverts and introverts, right? And I think that's the diversity that we kept hearing was, I like doing the masterminds because that's small. That feels like go to a coffee shop and talk. I don't like to go to a big meeting where I feel like I'm on stage. Okay, we can do that. That's just a different way that they like the programming. And it's, again, 10% of my members go to that. That's beautiful.
And plus, some people would think 10% isn't enough. I mean, they get to 10%, they'd go, oh my God, only 10%.
Hey, 2 years ago it was 0.
We have 80 people and only 8 people showed up for that. Oh my God, what a failure. You know, and that's
It's not.
a different mindset too.
It's a different mindset.
10% is okay.
Yeah.
You know,
And if
got
you ask
10%
those
of
8
your group
people,
coming.
was that a failure, and they say no, then
Right.
Right,
you got to look at it from what value those 8 people got.
exactly.
I'm just curious, how do you really measure the vitality of your events?
So we've actually played with that. Like we will actually at our board meetings or board parties, we will talk about we all start our meetings, and again, we learn this at LI, start with something good and positive that you've done professionally or personally. So people get to know each other, and people will generally say, God, that event the other day was awesome. Masterminds this week was really whatever. And we just kind of gauge it on the feedback, the informal feedback, you know. We've thought about doing like a Likert scale on color and letting people hit a button when they leave, you know. You see that like in, you know, how clean was the bathroom in the airport, you know. But we've actually toyed with doing a 5-point scale, a color scale, and then just like you can do a word cloud, you know, with people's commentary, do a color cloud to say how did we lead really red? Was it green? Was it blue? And we're actually going to play with that this year a little bit so that we can go like, wow, this was a color burst, or this was whatever, and this is how intense people felt about it. I mean, if I could do that displaced worker thing where 3 people showed up, that would have been the brightest red you've ever seen. To them, that was what exactly they needed, and that would have
been
been.
to compare that with a survey, so you have.
Yeah, exactly.
Think about the color you gave. Now, you know, the next day.
Why is it?
reflect on that.
Exactly.
To have some verbatims.
So we are starting to play with that this year of how we color code that or word cloud that, just so we get a better sense of it. Because it is, I mean, we do it anecdotally now, but we all start the meetings with that, and it's actually pretty fun because, I mean, the masterminds people are also bragging about themselves, you know, it's great.
The bigger events have a specific survey.
Yeah, the bigger events have
like a convergence.
Right, Convergence will have one.
Has a lot of-
Yeah, the bigger stuff has a formal system, but, you know, we want to make something more formal that's interesting, that does it based on vitality.
More questions?
The mastermind group, is that a SIG, more or less?
Kind of. It's really about like, it's people that feel isolated, in the workplace that just want other smart people to talk to, really is what it is. And they, like literally sometimes I'll pop in on them because I'm not a member of them, but like you'll just listen to these conversations and people are talking like really smart stuff about public relations and communications, and they're solving problems for each other. And it's like this support group / educational group / friendship group. They're really good.
Is it something that's IABC wide or something you created?
Well, we went to LI,
Once
and
again.
LI taught us. I think it was the Orange County chapter that did them, and sometimes they do them. Because of travel in the Bay Area, it's hard, and so San Francisco was the model.
Same thing, yeah.
And so,
San Francisco has them, but they call them Networking 9, and it's,
Yeah.
you have one in the East Bay, one in San Francisco.
exactly.
And then you go and have dinner, and you pay for your own dinner, that's the cost. And then you sit down with, 9 people and talk about internal comms or,
And we
technology.
stole that concept and brought it to Minnesota.
So we do it 7 to 8 a.m., so people on their way to work. And we had done SIG groups before, so there's people in the one I go to, and Trace, who's here, is in that, and there's somebody, and you don't have to come to everyone, it's, monthly, but you might see them every, couple of meetings, and from Wells Fargo and Best Buy and Allianz and sole practitioners and somebody in crisis, and so it's and somebody in healthcare and somebody who's just had a job transition and somebody who's been in their senior level job for 15 years. So it's quite a mix that way, but again, more senior people and talking about issues that are common, or it might be about selling this or certification or something else. It's General Mills, it's just,
General Mills shows up.
and again, somebody who's changed and they're new in the communications, but they got a lot of experience, so it's
So it's
really
just
mixed.
10
It's
or more
not a
years
SIG
and
group,
you're
but it's
feeling-
facilitated. There's a topic, and I've just said, in talking about mass rates before, I think one of the brilliant things that they do with this $25 up front is the facilitator sends out an email saying, will you make it? We'll get your coffee. And so when you get there, that coffee cup's going to be there at 7 a.m.
Yep.
Somebody goes early, and it's there, your macchiato or your, your cold press, and it's sitting there with your name on it. So if I'm thinking
really cool.
at 6:32, I'm going to make my coffee, then maybe something. So, I'm there, but it's Canadian, so. But it seems to work because there's not very many coffee cups that get left there. And how many meetings have you gone to where here's all the name tags that people said they were going to come?
Right.
So again, sometimes too many around the table, but, not a big problem.
I think the
You're
big
just in a Starbucks.
the big thing about the masterminds group is it occasionally allows people to be vulnerable and say they don't know everything at their job, and they can throw it out amongst peers and not feel like they're judged, and they can feel like they can get the information they need. So when you watch them interact, it actually is pretty cool that people are able to say, you know what, can you just give me some advice on this? Or I'm struggling with this employee, or I'm struggling with this strategy. And you can't say that as a senior communicator, but here you can, because there's kind of like, we're here to help you. And they work, Joanne, they work great.
I feel like this is the perfect transition into chapters with Superstar
Yes.
Edge, because Minnesota is doing